those of you returning that have been here. Of course, I will say, start this morning, I think I may be able to get through the entirety of 24 just because, especially the front half of it, it just ties together all the things that we've been talking about for the past several weeks. I promise I'm not trying to rush through it because I want to be done. I very much appreciate being given the opportunity to teach. So, that being said, I will divide it up. We're going to go through 24 up until verse 21. I'll read that. We'll talk about it, and if we still have time, I'll read the rest of the passage and we'll talk about it. So, I'll begin with 24, verse 1. After 5 days, the high priest, Ananias, came down with some elders and a spokesman, one Tertullus. They laid before the governor their case against Paul. And when he had been summoned, Tertullus began to accuse him, saying, "Since through you we enjoy much peace, and since by your foresight, most excellent Felix, reforms are being made for this nation, in every way and everywhere we accept this with all gratitude. But to detain you no further, I beg you in your kindness to hear us briefly. For we have found this man a plague, one who stirs up riots among all the Jews throughout the world, and is a ringleader of the sect of the Nazarenes. He even tried to profane the temple, but we seized him. By examining him yourself, you will be able to find out from him about everything of which we accuse him." The Jews also joined in the charge, affirming that all these things were so. And when the governor had nodded to him to speak, Paul replied, "Knowing that for many years you have been a judge over this nation, I cheerfully make my defense. You can verify that it is not more than 12 days since I went up to worship in Jerusalem, and they did not find me disputing with anyone or stirring up a crowd, either in the temple or in the synagogues or in the city. Neither can they prove to you what they now bring up against me. But this I confess to you, that according to the way, which they call a sect, I worship the God of our fathers, believing everything laid down by the law and written in the prophets, having a hope in God, which these men themselves accept, that there will be a resurrection of both the just and the unjust. So I always take pains to have a clear conscience toward both God and man. Now after several years, I came to bring alms to my nation and to present offerings. While I was doing this, they found me purified in the temple, without any crowd or tumult. But some Jews from Asia, they ought to be here before you and make an accusation, should they have anything against me. Or else let these men themselves say what wrongdoing they found when I stood before the council. Other than this one thing that I cried out while standing among them, it is with respect to the resurrection of the dead that I am on trial before you today. On trial before you this day. So, go back to the start and I'll recap. Obviously, we left off last week with Paul being sent into the custody of Felix from the tribune over, or the tribune that was at least visiting Jerusalem. But the tribune there, Claudius Lysias, hearing that there was a plot to kill Paul, had sent him to the governor, Felix, for additional protection. And then Felix had said to Paul that you'll be safer here, and they'll have to come out here to make their case. They're not going to be able to enact this plan of theirs to basically ambush you in the Jewish court. They'll have to bring themselves into a Roman court. And so we see the follow-up from that. It says that the high priest comes down with elders and a spokesperson, a man called Tertullus, who, despite his Roman name, is Jewish, and he is distinctly called out apart from the elders. That is because he's not an elder, he's not a scribe, he's not directly associated with the Sanhedrin. He is, I like the way Dr. Sproul puts it, a hired gun. He's a lawyer, and he's been hired by the Sanhedrin to make the case against Paul. So Tertullus opens saying, "Since through you we enjoy much peace." Yeah. And again, I'll say I am drawing heavily from Dr. Sproul. I'd very much recommend that if you want more clarity on this, it would not hurt for you to listen to him as well, especially since he has other anecdotes later in the passage from his own personal life that he helps make points within the text. But he says to the governor, Felix, "Through you we enjoy much peace." There's much to be said about Tertullus and the way that and to contrast with how Paul opens with his defense in front of Tertullus, saying that the governor, Felix, is directly responsible for the peace. We've talked about it in the past weeks. The Pax Romana, the peace of Rome, that Rome, wherever it goes, it comes in and it just wants things to run smooth. They don't want uproars. They just want people to do their jobs and pay their taxes. But, again, Dr. Sproul points out that in particular, the governor, Felix, he was noted as being especially brutal in bringing this peace wherever he went. There is another historian by the name of Tacitus who says about Felix that he would, in his way of keeping the peace, he brought a desert and called it peace. Yeah. In his way of any time there was uproar, outcry, rebellion, he would bring the cohorts, the legions in, the soldiers, and they would lay siege against the walled cities, and they would destroy the countryside. That out here in Judea and Israel, it is, for the most part, desert, but due to the Jews' agricultural efforts, they managed to make it beautiful. They made it into good, arable land. And Dr. Sproul talks about, in particular, the Mount of Olives, the Garden of Gethsemane and the Mount of Olives, where Jesus, on his night there, before he went up to be crucified, it was practically a forest of olive trees. But then by the time of the year 70 AD, when Jerusalem was destroyed at the hands of Rome, by that time every tree had been chopped down. There was not a single olive tree on top of the Mount of Olives. But this was the way that the governor Felix came in and brought his peace. by desolating the land in order to make the people compliant. But here we have Tertullus praising this peace that Governor Felix brings. And I will just go ahead, we'll say, skip ahead just a bit to Paul's address of Felix, or how much more understated it is compared to Tertullus. Paul just appeals to his rulership, his long-term governorship of Judea, him knowing the people personally and their laws. Sorry, folks, I'm a little bit nervous, a little bit scatterbrained. But just the main takeaway is that, Tertullus is just very clearly appealing to Felix's ego. He is, trying to butter him up, grease his palms, however you want to put it. Talking about his foresight, which in other translations, and indeed the more correct translation would be providence. Once again, attributing to this pagan governor what he really should be attributing to the providence of God. Again, to the point that Sproul calls this man out. It's like he betrays his own Judaism. Yeah. I don't know. Y'all familiar with the term gassing up? Gassing up this governor who has come in and desolated the land. In every way and everywhere we accept this with all gratitude. You can just feel it, this insincere praise just dripping off of his words. But to detain you no further, as if this entire process hasn't been excessively litigious, I beg you in your kindness to hear us briefly. For we have found this man a plague, one who stirs up riots, and is a ringleader of a sect, basically. I know there's things about the terminology of things like sect and cult. I know cult was more or less common terminology to refer to different pagan groups that were, still acceptable, the cults of the different Greek gods, cult of Dionysus and whatnot. But here, the word sect is basically being used the way that we would use the word cult today, where it was, something outcast, something less acceptable to society. And then he, again, says all of these things regarding Paul, and the Jews there affirm it. And then Paul gets to make his defense. And again, he says, knowing that for many years you've been a judge over this nation, I make this defense cheerfully. Again, not making it seem as though the sun is shining off of the governor, to be poetic. Just saying, hey, I know your credentials as a governor, specifically over Judea. So I know that you know what you're doing as a judge over this case. you can verify that it is not more than 12 days since I went up to worship in Jerusalem. Basically, Paul defending himself, saying, they're saying that I've been stirring up people, stirring up crowds, riots. I haven't even been here long enough to do that. I've been here for less than 2 weeks, and more than half of that was spent in a purification, trying to make myself clean to even be able to go into the temple. And they did not find me disputing with anyone or stirring up a crowd, even in the temple or in the synagogues or in the city. Yeah, Paul here calling out that he hadn't even gone to the synagogues in Jerusalem, which is normally how he operates, is that he would go to the city. He took very seriously Christ's commission to bring the word to the Jew first and then the Gentile. So anywhere he went to the synagogues first. He's saying, I didn't even do that much. I haven't been preaching while I've been here. Was here to, later on say, I was here to bring money to my brothers, to bring alms to the people that I call family, that I call brothers. These brothers that are brothers with me according to the way, which they call a sect. They call some outcast cult that does all these things that they can't prove. They're saying I'm stirring up dissension when you are able to, you can very easily find out, going out and getting testimony from witnesses to events, that that's just not the case. Yes. He brings it back around to, through this way, which they call a sect, I worship the God of our fathers, believing everything laid down by the law and written in the prophets. Talking about, again, I know Dr. Sproul talks about how that's really the issue here in his personal anecdotes. He talks about having friends that were close to the point of being family who were Jewish, and saying, "Oh, there's so much division between us because of Jesus. If it weren't for Jesus, we wouldn't have to be divided like this." And that there are other people who said, "Oh yeah, the Jews believe in the Old Testament, we believe in the New Testament," and no, that's not the case, because in the events that are being told to us here in the New Testament, you have to remember that at least for the Gospels, the events of the Gospels, the events recounting the life of Jesus, New Testament formally didn't exist yet, because it was being written. No, it wasn't even being written yet. It was happening. So what Jesus was disputing with the Pharisees and the scribes and the Sadducees was the Old Testament. That was the only scripture they had at that point. And Jesus was disputing, and now Paul, following in the footsteps of Jesus, following in the footsteps of Stephen, even with this trial of his, is talking about that's the real issue here, is that I am holding to what's been laid out for us in the law and the prophets. I see the messianic claim of Jesus. I see the fulfillment of our scriptures, which you and I both say that we believe. And I say, okay, this man has said that he is the fulfillment of Scripture, and I accept that, not because, again, Paul is just making the case of I accept what's been written down and you don't, but of course it goes into, you can see, again, these are all very educated men that are making these claims, but see that Paul accepts it and the other Pharisees do not. Despite even, again, like we've called out in previous weeks, he and the Pharisees share even more ground than Paul and the Sadducees, because the Sadducees don't believe in the resurrection, don't believe in the spiritual realm. But Paul talks about he's taken pains to try and be acceptable to these people that he called brother before he was called by Christ to a different family. Yeah. And so, to circle back around to the point, it's that, subtext is that these guys are all coming from the same place in terms of what they know and what they profess to believe. But Paul accepts Jesus where others that have the exact same knowledge and understanding deny Jesus. And that's not because Paul is better or smarter, or it's not anything of Paul. It's because he's the reason we call it a Damascus experience. He was blinded. He was shown the truth, and the truth was so bright as to blind him. He was made to believe. And then he talks about, we also believe, like I said, spiritual realm, resurrection, that there will be a resurrection of both the just and the unjust. And, I think that may have to step out from behind the pulpit here. I know that strays into eschatology territory, but, it's pretty plain in the text that it's not just, us as the children of God that are going to come back. Everybody's going to come back, because everybody's going to stand before God bodily and be judged. Which, chilling thought. Yes. Paul just continuing to reinforce his case. They found me purified in the temple. I wasn't stirring up the crowd in the temple. And again, I'm a little bit, found the train tracks again, I think, All right. They found me purified in the temple. Not with a crowd or causing commotion. I wasn't with a Gentile in the temple, which is what, contrast here, what they were accusing me of, that now they're saying that wasn't, I was trying to do that. They couldn't actually prove that I had done it, so now they're just trying to imply that I was trying to do it. They're shifting their argument every time to try and pin me on something that they don't have the evidence for. Yes. And then some Jews from Asia, the Ephesians that had caused trouble for Paul in the past, who were here for the feast. Now, they had made claims against him. They were responsible for the claims that he had defiled the temple by bringing in a Gentile man past the court of the Gentiles. And Paul says, no, they should really be here so that they can make their accusations. Because, again, there's already a degree of separation with Ananias and the other elders being here, having hired Tertullus to make their case. But they are at least there bodily. They basically had Tertullus organize the case, being a formal lawyer, and they're agreeing with what he's saying. But then they're also bringing forward claims that were made by other parties that aren't here. So they're bringing you hearsay. And then again, this particular passage ends with, this is all really about the resurrection. This is all really about Christ being who he said he was, because if Paul basically making the argument that has been made throughout time since, that if I say that Christ is who he says he was, that he is the Messiah, and you say that he isn't, at least one of us is wrong and in defiance of God. It could be, perish the thought, that we're both wrong, but we can't both be right. So, having muddled through that, if anyone has comments before we move on to the next section. Yes, Sonny. Yes. Yeah. All right. So, yes, of course. Right. Right. I did not look into the Greek. But you're saying there's similarity, if not the same there, between that term that they're using and Christ, his claim to be the way, the truth, the light. Right. Yeah. It's like, yeah, I'm a member of this thing that they're saying, but it's not what they're saying it is. All right. And then I'll pick up with verse 22. I think we can close out the chapter today. But Felix, having a rather accurate knowledge of the way, put them off, saying, when Lysias, the tribune, comes down, I will decide your case. Then he gave orders to the centurion that he should be kept in custody, but have some liberty, and that none of his friends should be prevented from attending to his needs. After some days, Felix came with his wife Drusilla, who was Jewish, and he sent for Paul and heard him speak about faith in Christ Jesus. And as he reasoned about righteousness and self-control and the coming judgment, Felix was alarmed and said, go away for the present. When I get an opportunity, I will summon you. At the same time, he hoped that money would be given him by Paul. So he sent for him often and conversed with him. When 2 years had elapsed, Felix was succeeded by Porcius Festus. And desiring to do the Jews a favor, Felix left Paul in prison. Now, circling back around to Felix's tactics with dealing with rebellion being rather brutal. It talks about after 2 years from this point, he's succeeded by a different governor. And it's worth noting who made that decision, because the contemporary history is that Nero, or the Emperor Claudius, died and was succeeded by Nero. And he was the one that took Felix out of governorship here. Nero, who was noted specifically because of Felix's brutality. Emperor Nero, who in other points in history and by Jewish authors is referred to as the beast, as in the beast of Revelation. He was so cruel as to be thought of as a literally apocalyptic figure. And Felix was too much for him. He had to pull him out of there, had to have him do something else. Just interesting to note. And so, yeah, this passage starts a little bit upbeat, but even there at the start, you can kind of see the seed of where it's going, where it says, again, it starts out, Felix having rather accurate knowledge of the way. So Paul was correct. He's been governing this area, so he's heard plenty about, he knows, these early Christians are not an unknown quantity to him. He's not just taking the Sanhedrin and their claims at face value. But then it turns, the beginnings of the turn begin when he says he puts them off. He does not go ahead and make a formal judgment after having heard both sides of this case. And he puts it off. He says, when the tribune comes down, I'll decide the case. But again, that's a little bit obfuscated by the fact that he tells the centurion, keep him in custody. We need to keep him safe. As far as we know, the plot to kill him is still on. So we'll keep him in custody and have him safe. But, we're not going to mistreat him in custody. He will have some liberty. Don't prevent his friends from coming in and attending to his needs. So, he's not being hindered. That's why in other places in Scripture we get told, or Sermon on the Mount, Christ says, you visited me in prison. Because we know that as things shift and turn, at the very least here in America, as things shift away from Christianity having primacy, acceptability in the public consciousness, that is exceedingly likely. And again, Dr. Sproul says a bit more on that. And I always recommend his sermons. Yes. And then Felix comes in and talks to Paul a little bit more, specifically about faith in Jesus. And as he reasoned about righteousness and self-control and the coming judgment, Felix was alarmed. He said, "Go away for the present. When I get an opportunity, I will summon you." So apparently, like we said, the early Christians weren't an unknown quantity to Felix, but he did not have the full picture. And when Paul tells him the full picture, he gets scared and pushes Paul back again and says, "Nah, go away. It's kind of like, I don't really want to talk to you anymore. But when I get an opportunity, I'll summon you again. We'll talk again." And at the same time, he hoped that money would be given him by Paul. So he sent for him often and conversed with him. So he did talk to him again, but he was expecting money out of him. I can imagine that, him ordering the centurion, don't hinder his friends from coming in and helping him. They probably gave him money to assist with different things. And Felix really showing his heart in the situation, expected a little bit of that, expected basically a kickback. He expected some of that to come back to him. When 2 years had elapsed, Felix was succeeded by Porcius Festus. Again, as we said, at the behest of Nero, pulling him out of governorship in that reason. And desiring to do the Jews a favor, Felix left Paul in prison. That's really what cements it, is that, he, as far as we can tell, as far as we can see from the passage, he never makes a formal ruling on Paul's case, and then he leaves governorship and leaves Paul in prison, which we know in the providence of God is great, because that gave us the prison epistles. But again, you're very much, that was through the heart of a man who appears to be very distant from God, as far as we can tell. That is the end of chapter 24. Yes, Blaine.
It's interesting how Felix was blaming it on Lysias.
Yes. Yes.
But he wasn't there, so then Felix says that he's going to wait for that guy to come,
Right.
but it never shows that he comes.
Right.
And the other thing I always find interesting in these trials, you brought it out, when you study the background of these various people, like Felix and Julius and these different ones, is what makes me think about is where I work up at Fort Rucker, we have all these different agencies.
Mm-hmm.
I go to a lot of these meetings where we're determining different things, procedures and policies and stuff like that. And we have, if you go into the meeting, you wouldn't know that, like, the people that I work with these various agencies, we have relationships that are unofficial behind the scenes.
Mm.
And so I'll get together with a particular person, and we'll decide that there's this problem that we need to fix, and then we come up with a way to fix it. Then we go to the meetings, and we, even though we're from these different agencies, other people there, we've already kind of figured out how we're going to attack it together.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? And so then, and here's where I'm going with that. When you take a look at the way that these people are, and these relationships behind the scene, one of the things that when I was studying this, that I came across, I want to read it, like Felix, the reason is Paul said that he had a pretty accurate understanding of the way. His wife Priscilla, did you read anything about Priscilla?
Right.
Yeah, and I won't just read this, but this is something I came across. This is very interesting. But Priscilla says that her great-grandfather was the one that tried to kill Jesus in Matthew chapter 2.
Mm.
It was her great-uncle who killed John the Baptist and mocked Jesus at his trial.
Mm.
And it was her father that killed the Apostle James. So when you think about the relationships there, the behind-the-scenes relationships like with Priscilla, Felix is married to her. So he's got all that knowledge.
Luke would be pointing that out because that would be known to the people reading this, more than likely.
And then those behind-the-scenes relationships that Felix would have with her and with all those other people behind the scenes about Paul, and then not wanting to stir up the things that they're going to call them a sect, which, as you brought out, is considered, an apostate or a heresy. Then he wants to keep that peace, so he wants to make sure that they're not stirring things up. And his wife and her family has already been associated with that sect. Anyways, I just thought it was, all the behind-the-scenes stuff that, yeah, it's like soap opera.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess.
We don't lose sight of the fact, and you're doing a great job, by the way.
Thank you.
We just came out of chapter 23 a couple of weeks ago. Jesus has spoken directly to Paul. Jesus Christ revealed himself again to Paul and says, don't worry about what's going on. I'm going to send you to Rome, and you will testify of me to Caesar. And so everything that we're reading right now is just a series of events that Christ has organized to get Paul to Rome. He
Yep.
promised Paul. Verbally, Paul heard Christ speak to him. Don't worry about what's going on. You must go to Rome. I'll take care of it. So during this whole thing, Paul's got to have that echoing in his mind.
Mhm.
Y'all do whatever you need to do. But Christ is sending me to Rome.
Yep.
CC.
And I know that we very easily joke about, oh yeah, he went there in chains, not ridden on a horse all grand, but at least for part of the journey, he was on a horse with a big military escort because God was keeping him safe from people that wanted to hurt him.
All along the way, he was being protected, and he had to realize that, know that. Okay? Had to give him confidence as he spoke.
Mhm. Yes. All right.
That line of thought, I think, we could extend, he was talking about this whole series of events. The whole series of events that we're experiencing right now
Yes.
is also ordained by our Lord.
Yes.
And there's no reason for us to be afraid or think that the king is not the king. He absolutely is, and we get to be part of bringing his kingdom into this world.
Yes.
I think there's a lot of reason for optimism right now, and I don't know, I might be in the minority, but I'm really looking at current events going, wow.
Yes. Absolutely.
We couldn't have planned this, but the Lord
Exactly.
did.
Yeah, I'm not even sure that you're minority, at least not here, because yes, God is sovereign. His hand is in all of it. There are, like Brandon loves to say, there are no rogue atoms, because God's over all of it. All right, it is 10:15. I hate to cut it short if there's any more discussion, but if y'all want to do that on the way to service this morning, you're more than welcome to, but I'm going to go ahead and pray and we'll close out. Lord, just again, I say thank you. Thank you for the opportunity that I've had to lead this class and just discuss with my brothers and sisters about your word. And as we just said, we know that no matter what's happening in the world, that you're over all of it. And just don't let us get bogged down in things that are going on. Don't let us cast our eyes down to the things that we're caught up in down here. We need to be aware of it, but we need to keep our eyes up on you so that we know how to navigate it. I just ask that you continue to let what we say and how we act this morning be fruitful. In your son's name, amen.